Well, once again, I'm here on the campus of Sam Houston State University's golf course called Raven Nest Golf Course. I'm going to take a look at quite a few of the spring plants, late spring, late April plants, and what they look like at this time of the year. This little shrub is called Eastern Baccharis. Sometimes it'll get 10 feet tall. Here's a taller plant back behind here. Eastern Baccharis. It likes to be around water most of the time. These plants are not in particular close to a water supply, but it doesn't like to be out on really dry natured soils. It's not considered a desirable species. It's not very palatable. In the fall, it will bear a profusion of beautiful white flowers. And I've actually seen this used as an ornamental in some cases. But it grows wild. Eastern Baccharis. This is one of the most interesting grass members of the tall grass prairie, and you don't find much of it anymore because most of it's been overgrazed. It's such excellent quality and so high in palatability that the animals will usually graze it out of existence. But out here on the golf course, this area doesn't get grazed or mowed, and so this is Eastern Gamagrass. I planted this in here about 30 years ago, and it's now pretty solid in some places. That's an Eastern Gamagrass crop that you see right there. What's interesting about Eastern Gamagrass, to me, is that it actually has male and female flowers, something like a corn plant, but you see the swollen flowers or the bigger flowers toward the base of that inflorescence. Those are the female flowers, and as you go toward the tip, those are only males. Only the female flowers toward the bottom will form seeds. This one hasn't flowered yet, so you're not actually seeing seeds form there. Look at the grass. It looks a little bit like Johnson grass. The leaf blade's not quite as wide. The prominent midrib is not quite as prominent. And the leaf blade is a dull green color also. The other thing that gives it away is that it's a bunch grass. I'm standing in the middle of a 5-foot bunch clump of Eastern Gamagrass. Again, outstanding forage quality. Just looking over here at this plant, I see one flower, or actually several, that are in bloom. See if I can get it in my camera here. Here we go. The anthers are hanging out of the male flowers, female flowers at the base. So sort of like corn. Tripsicum is the genus. Some people suggest it actually has some relationship to corn, but that's largely been disproven, other than the fact that they are both grasses. There's some more that are in full bloom right now. Seeds will form soon. This grass can reseed itself, but if you have it in a pasture where you're grazing it, it rarely gets an opportunity to produce seeds. The seeds are large. Anyhow, Eastern Gamagrass. This is a small tree, usually 20 to 30 feet tall or shorter. It's called the honey locust. And it is one mean little rascal. As you can see, all the spines growing along the stem, and even some that grow along the trunk. For instance, this one right here. Some much worse than that. The spines generally are very sharp pointed and will have two shorter points coming off of the main point, as you see right here. Later in the summer, the honey locust will produce a pod of beans like similar to mesquite beans. And the inside of that pod is a sweet flavored substance, and the Indians used to scrape that out and use it as a sweetener. That's why it gets the name honey locust. The bees don't particularly use the honey locust to make honey with, in case you were wondering. Anyhow, usually an invader of the fence lines. What you're seeing here is a combination of this year's new growth and the old stems from last year's growth of a mass of goldenrod. This is tall goldenrod, sometimes called Canadian goldenrod. There are many different species of goldenrod. This is one of the taller ones. They're all members of the Solidago genus. I'll get a little bit more close-up of the leaves. So here's what the young plant, there's a little bit of Singletary P in there, but the young plant right here, tall goldenrod. Last year's stems still standing. Last year's flower stalk. Late in the summer, usually August, these plants will produce a new flower stalk, and you'll see a mass of gold about 4 feet, 5 feet tall. Just solid. Bees love it. In fact, they use a lot of goldenrod to put up their honey stores for the fall and winter. So goldenrod is a very important plant for the honeybees in late summer, when there aren't very many other things blooming. Here's one of my least favorite plants, a member of the Solanaceae family. This is horse nettle. It is about to bloom. I see some flowers forming there toward the middle of the picture. Getting ready to bloom. You see the spines on the bottom of the leaf along the veins of the plant. It's a dangerous plant. You wouldn't want to bale that up into a bunch of nice Bermuda grass hay, because then your animals can't pick it out and they end up eating that. That doesn't make good quality hay. And this happens to be growing in amongst a good crop of improved Bermuda grass. Horse nettle. It's a fairly healthy stand of Johnson grass, an invasive African species of sorghum halopense. Usually early in the season, or when it's been kind of cool like it has been lately, you'll see a lot of purple coloration of the plants, expressing the anthocyanin pigments. You even got a few of the inflorescences emerging a little bit early. Kind of got a purplish tint to them, sometimes very purple. It all depends on the temperatures and the time of the year. Anyhow, this makes a very excellent quality forage plant. Wide leaf blade, prominent white midrib, usually some purplish coloration to it, but not always. Makes an excellent quality hay crop if you can get it dried properly. This time of year, Johnson grass produces an inflorescence, but it's usually diseased and doesn't form seeds. You can prove that to yourself by hitting it on something. I was hoping for a little better background, but it's full of smut, a fungal disease. It's not going to form any viable seeds in this crop. And that smut fungus lives within the plant tissue. And in fact, these plants will never form any viable seeds because they're infected. This is a little weedy grass called little barley. right here in the center of the picture. You see a lot of ryegrass around it. Little barley is a common invader, weedy species. Cool season, it's going to die before long. It won't persist into the summer. It's an annual, but it produces a lot of seeds and it will come back from those seeds. Just a little better focus on the seed heads of little barley. Hordeum pusillum. Little barley. What you see here is a hillside covered with wild grapes, muscadine grapes. They're native to this country, and they produce a lot of fruit. A lot of animals like to eat on the muscadine fruit, and a lot of people will collect those muscadine fruit if they can beat the animals to it and make some good old muscadine wine, or they might make muscadine jelly if they don't want to drink the wine. Here's a little close-up of the plant. Little leaves are kind of silvery, the new leaves, tendrils. This is a climbing plant, and I'm into the fire ants. This pretty little wildflower is called obedient plant. If you push the flowers to one side, they'll stay there. Therefore, it is obedient. You'll notice it's visited by a lot of pollinators. Got honeybees working on it this morning. It's a perennial rhizomatous plant. So again, a lot of rhizomatous plants, when you see one, you see many, because they grow new rhizomes for next year. It's a very attractive plant. This is another vine that's common to our area. It hasn't fruited yet. This is pepper vine, red stem, compound leaves, 3 leaflets usually, sometimes more. Here's the new growth, kind of a reddish color. The fruit will form a little later in the summer. It'll be a little black berry full of seeds with juices. It's not edible. Pepper vine. This plant is one that most of us would want to avoid. If you don't recognize it, you can see that it has 3 leaflets per leaf, and it's beginning to flower. These are the primordial blossoms, not quite flowering. But this is poison ivy, and of course many people are allergic to the effects of poison ivy. It grows as a vine. Sometimes it'll just grow as a small shrub out in the open. I have been able to control it with repeated sprayings of Roundup or glyphosate herbicide as it pops up out of the ground. So here's a poison ivy plant that's just growing all by itself, like a small tree. It's not attached to anything. Nonetheless, it has the same toxic compounds, urushiol, inside the sap that cause a lot of people pure misery. Poison ivy. This small tree or shrub is called the red osier dogwood, sometimes called the red twig dogwood. It likes to grow near water, abundance of water. You'll find a few bees visiting this, not as much as some of the other flowering shrubs this time of the year. But this one is obviously collecting pollen. Red twig dogwood or red osier dogwood. Here's the last of the season's growth of rescue grass. It won't be long. A little bit more heat and a little drier conditions and all the rescue grass will be dead because it's an annual. But here it is growing in amongst some Bermuda grass. And then there's another brome species right next to it. If you see how wide these floral structures are on rescue grass, then I'll pan over here and you see a similar sort of inflorescence, but not as wide and a little more cylindrical. That grass is another invader, an annual, and it's called ripgut brome because those seeds tend to cause an infestation or stick into the gut of grazing animals if they're forced to graze it. They generally don't want to eat these seed heads. Ripgut brome. Both of them are bromus species, or they're in the bromus genus. A pretty little wildflower called self-heal or heal-all. Very attractive. Springtime bloomer. See the leaf tissue on it. Usually grows in communities. There's usually several flowers in a clump. This isn't a particularly dense community of it here, but most of the time you'll find it with lots of these blooms on it. This is a good shot of Singletary pea, also called Cali pea. It's growing in amongst some goldenrod and Johnson grass, and you can see a little bit of showy evening primrose starting to fade there. You can get a little close-up of this Cali pea so you can see what the flower looks like and the leaf structure. It's a pretty little flower. It's a legume, very high protein, very high quality. You see the leaflets, there's a pair of leaflets subtended by a little tendril. So it's a climbing legume. Very attractive little flower. See if I can focus on that a little bit better. Excellent quality forage. When the seeds form, however, little black seeds may carry a toxin, a mild toxin. Probably not good to graze at that point. So usually this thing reseeds itself. Some people plant it. It's good quality at this stage. This would be an ideal time to make hay out of it. Again, if you could get it to dry. Here's a pretty good dewberry crop. I think I'm going to pick and eat those. If you don't know your trees, this is a common East Texas tree, southeastern United States. It's called a sweet gum. And right here in the foreground, there's some Brazilian vervain. There's another sweet gum tree. They produce a little spiky sweet gum balls that bear seeds. Not a very desirable tree species. The wood doesn't burn, nor is it used to make furniture. Not very many redeeming features of this plant. Here's another native grass species called switchgrass. I planted it here about 30 years ago also. What you're seeing here, of course, is late spring, early summer growth, and it's at its finest at this point in time. Very high quality forage. Lots of it too. It's a bunch type grass. You can see it growing in clumps. It's been used as a bioenergy crop studied frequently. Here's some taller seed heads from last year's switchgrass. Those seed heads go up 12 feet tall. The plant won't get quite that tall. The leaves won't, but the inflorescence will. It's a loose open panicle type inflorescence. But it's not going to flower until a little bit later in the summer. Switchgrass. This interesting little tree is often a fence line invader, much the same as honey locust, probably more so. It just seems like the fence line is where it prefers to be. It's an interesting tree. It goes by different names. Some people call it prickly ash. It has a leaf that resembles the ash tree, and it's blooming right now. Blooms aren't very obvious. Shiny, dark green leaves. What's notorious about it, though, is the thorns that grow all over the tree. If you look at the branch, lots of thorns growing off the branch of the tree. Trying to focus on this a little bit. And the trunk of the tree has sharp little thorns also growing out of it. So because of the appearance of the trunk, some people call this tree Hercules Club. And if you cut a piece of the bark off and put it in your mouth, on your tongue, or on a place where you have a toothache, it will tingle, and it will actually, the chemical compound will relieve the pain. Therefore, the American Indians, Native Americans, would use this to soothe their pain around toothaches. They call this the toothache tree. And also it's called tingle tongue. So you just have to take a little sliver of that bark, very thinly sliced, put it in your mouth, leave it there for a couple of minutes, and you'll notice the effects of it. Hercules Club, prickly ash, tingle tongue, toothache tree. Here's a nice little patch of wild onion, sometimes called wild garlic. They're both in the allium genus. Anyhow, I think you can see the little bulblets that form. So the plant has its own bulb below ground, and then these little bulblets will drop off, and they're asexual propagules. They're not seeds. They're actually just little beginning bulbs. And so oftentimes when you see wild garlic or wild onion, you'll see a lot of it in one small area. And that's what you see here. There's a little singletary pea mixed in there with it, climbing along with it. Some ryegrass, annual ryegrass, a few other things. Wild onion, wild garlic. This is a good illustration of yellow sweet clover growing back behind these goldenrods. It's about 4.5 feet tall. Yellow flowers, spikes of flowers. Not very many leaves on here, but when it was younger, it had a lot of leaves. This yellow sweet clover tells me this soil is near neutral in pH, and it's a blackland. That usually means it's a heavy clay, black colored soil. That's what yellow sweet clover prefers. Here's a thistle that's gone to seed. You can see the leaf of the thistle is pretty spiny, and there are many different thistles. This one happens to be musk thistle, or perhaps even yellow thistle. Pretty hard to identify once it's gone to seed. You see these little seeds are kind of like dandelions. They catch in the air. Lots of birds eat the thistle seeds. Lots of pollinators visit the thistle flowers. Fuzzy, wind-blown seeds of thistles.